Welcome, dreamers, to the realm where time flows like a river of shadows, and the stars above echo with forgotten truths. Tonight, we sail through the silence of centuries, drifting past broken ziggurats, weathered clay tablets, and dusty riverbank, to a mystery that hums faintly beneath the sands of ancient Mesopotamia. They call it the Baghdad Battery, a clay jar, copper, and iron. But perhaps more than just a vessel. Perhaps a spark from a forgotten world of knowledge. A whisper of electricity before its time. But we do not come to solve this riddle. We come to sit beside it, to feel the breath of antiquity brush against our cheeks, and to wonder, together, what once was, before we embark on this journey through time's mysteries. If these ancient whispers resonate with your soul, let your presence be known through a gentle light, and join our circle of dreamers by subscribing to continue these nightly journeys into history's hidden realms. Share with us, fellow dreamers, from which corner of the world you're joining tonight's contemplation. Let the global community of history's mysteries connect across time zones as we drift together into the past. Close your eyes, if you wish. Let the flicker of oil lamps and the rhythm of old riverbeds guide you. As we begin, it sits behind glass now, silent and unassuming. In the National Museum of Iraq, in a quiet corner where few linger, there is a clay vessel, shaped with care and long-forgotten purpose, brown and earthen with a cork once nestled at its mouth. It waits, quietly as if remembering. Its form is humble, but its presence is persistent. A jar, no taller than your hand, lined with a cylinder of copper. An iron rod corroded rises from its center. It is not labeled a mystery, but it does not need to be. Some say it is nothing but a storage vessel, a container for sacred scrolls, a tool for alchemy, or perhaps a forgotten ritual. But others, standing before it, have felt a question spark in the heart. Could this have been a battery? Could there have been electricity long before the wires of the modern world? The museum lights hum above, but the jar's silence feels older, as if even the air around it remembers another rhythm. We lean closer. Its copper is dulled by centuries, but once it might have gleamed in the flickering light of a Mesopotamian fire. The iron rod, rusted and rough, may have once pulsed with hidden energy, and between them, a space, a gap, where lemon juice or vinegar may have once flowed. A simple acid, creating a charge, a current, a whisper of power. And we ask ourselves why. Was it made for light, for magic, for healing, or ritual? We may never know. But tonight, we do not seek answers. We seek the dream. We seek the silence between the lines of time, where possibilities still bloom. The museum sleeps as we walk through its echoes. Statues of kings and scribes peer from their shadows. Cuneiform tablets press their messages into eternity. And somewhere, behind the glass, the Baghdad Battery waits, waiting not to be explained, but to be felt. Long before the jar sat beneath museum glass, long before electricity was named, before currents danced through copper wires, there was a land of clay and stars, a land of reeds and river song, Mesopotamia. The name itself means the land between rivers, between the Tigris and the Euphrates, a cradle not only of civilization, but of wonder. Here, in the slow embrace of fertile the first cities rose: Uruk, Eridu, Nippur, Babylon, cities of baked brick and priestly chant, where ziggurats pointed heavenward, and men walked among gods. It is here our story flows, not in a straight line, but in slow spirals, like the turning of a potter's wheel. The people of this land looked up and saw meaning in the stars. They looked down and pressed meaning into wet clay. They watched the flight of birds, and read omens in the liver of sheep. Their world shimmered with signs, and every object could hold power. A jar, then, was never just a jar. A reed, never just a reed. Each thing lived within a web of divine breath and earthly echo. And somewhere, perhaps in a quiet workshop in Seleucid or Baghdad, or in the corner of a temple storehouse, a craftsman placed copper inside clay and lowered an iron rod into something more than a vessel, or a ritual passed down from before the first kings, a secret held in whispers, breathed across centuries from priest to priest. We do not know. But here, in Mesopotamia, where ink was first pressed into tablets, where time was first divided, and where knowledge flowed like water through canals, here the spark may have come not just of power, but of curiosity. The human need not just to survive, but to understand. We drift above the ancient rivers now. Their courses altered, but their memories still strong. We pass over cracked soil and buried walls, and we listen to the hum beneath history, the vibration that never ceased to hum, like the charge within the battery. And so, in this land between rivers, we begin not with science, but with wonder, the silence beneath the earth, beneath the soils of Baghdad, under layers of dust and time. There was silence, not an empty silence, but a waiting one, the kind that holds its breath when footsteps pass above. It was in 1936, when the earth was stirred, an excavation in the Kujit Hills, just beyond the city's southern curve, a dig among ruins and shards, ordinary finds in an ordinary layer. The jar, clay-bodied simple but within it a copper tube, and an iron rod. The workers paused. Archaeologist Wilhelm Keeg took note. The artifact was lifted, catalogued, studied, but its meaning remained elusive, an object out of place in time. It did not speak its truth, not yet. Years would pass before someone suggested, what if this was not ritual, not symbolic? What if this was practical? What if this was a battery? The idea stirred the sands once more. Speculation swept through scholarly halls. Could ancient peoples have harnessed power? Could the Mesopotamians have known the touch of electricity long before lightning was chained by science? We do not say yes. We do not say no. We listen to the silence, for silence knows more than we do. The earth had cradled this vessel gently. No grand tomb, no inscribed explanation. Just buried memory. Perhaps it had been discarded, perhaps hidden, perhaps forgotten on purpose. Artifacts speak without voices, and we must listen with more than ears. So we sit beside the dig site in our dreaming. The sun high above the hills, the wind brushing over crumpled stones. The battery, freshly unearthed, yet eternally old, and we feel that hush again. That tremble of something unsaid, something electric, in the stillness. Let us wander now into the minds of those who may have made it, not with the urgency of invention, but with the patience of memory, as if they were not discovering electricity, but remembering it. The jar you see was not complex. Clay formed by hand, copper sheet carefully rolled, an iron rod, straight and firm, all held in simple alignment. Add an acidic solution, lemon juice, vinegar, or fermented wine, and the charge begins. Tiny, yes, just a flicker of current, a heartbeat of voltage. Yet, in a world lit by oil lamps and moonlight, even a flicker could seem divine. Was it a toy for priest-scientists? An offering to the gods? A healing tool? Perhaps. Some believe the battery was used to electroplate gold onto silver, a technique too advanced, some say, and yet tantalizing in its plausibility. Others believe it was for ritual, to give a sacred object a shock, a jolt that felt like power divine. Perhaps it buzzed softly in the hand, like a whisper against the skin, and those who held it felt closer to their gods, or to secrets not meant to last. The makers, whoever they were, left behind no manuals, no diagrams scratched into clay. Only the object itself and the silence surrounding it, a silence we must not mistake for ignorance. For, in the world of ancient Mesopotamia, science was not separate from spirit. Ritual was knowledge, and knowledge was holy. So if a priest placed a rod in a jar and heard it hum, he may have bowed in reverence, not to the power of electrons, but to the mystery they represented. And perhaps that is what we have forgotten. Not the technique, but the wonder. Not the function, but the feeling. A humble jar, a quiet hum, and a world that still believed every breath was touched by gods. Now imagine, dreamer, a sanctuary of stone and smoke, a temple in the heart of a city that no longer rises above the plains. Its walls are carved with beasts and stars. Its halls echo with the chant of priests and the shuffle of bare feet upon clay tiles. Inside, the battery rests, not in a laboratory, but on an altar. Beside it, a bowl of wine, a curl of incense, and the slow drip of oil into fire. The priest approaches with practice.com. His robes are woven with sacred sigils, and his eyes shimmer not with knowledge, but with belief. He lifts the jar with both hands. He places the rod within, and for a moment, there is a tingle. Not lightning, but something alive, something real. Perhaps, in this temple, electricity was never separated from prayer. It was not harnessed to light city, but to bridge worlds. Perhaps the Mesopotamians did not ask, what does it do? But rather, what does it mean? Here, technology and theology are not enemies, but companions. Each flash of power a whisper from the divine, each jolt a blessing, each hum. And so, beneath vaulted ceilings, where smoke spirals into sunbeams, the jar becomes a relic, a vessel of presence, not just for ions and acids, but for dreams. For the Mesopotamians lived not in a world divided, science here, spirit there, but in a world woven. The stars told stories. The rivers had moods, and even a silent jar might hold the voice of a forgotten god. Can you hear it now? The chanting fades, the fire crackles, and somewhere deep within the clay, a whisper stirs, a current of presence, a memory. Beyond the temple walls, beneath a canopy of date palms swaying in desert breeze, a scribe sits cross-legged in the shade. His stylus is sharp, his clay tablet warm from the sun, and though he writes of grain and kings, weights and celestial patterns, today he watches. He sees the priest carry the strange vessel. He hears the murmurs behind carved doors. He notes the ritual with silent reverence. But in his eyes, curiosity burns. He has no name, this scribe. No records of him remain, but let us call him the witness. The witness, with ink-dark hair and steady hands, who sees more than others say, who watches the hum of the copper, who listens to the air change when the iron meets the liquid. He cannot explain it, but he remembers. Perhaps, in his secret writings, he records not just the rituals, but the air, not the gods invoked, but the feeling that danced along his skin when the battery sang. In Mesopotamia, scribes were more than writers. They were guardians of meaning, keepers of order in a world half-seen. And so perhaps he etched a mark, a symbol in a margin, a shape that resembled the vessel with lines that mimicked copper coils and circles like ripples of force, a hidden clue, passed on through ink and breath, a trail not for us to follow, but to sense, to wonder, because not all who knew spoke, and not all who spoke were believed. The witness fades into the centuries, his clay tablets lost to time, but the memory of his eyes, still watching, still curious, lingers like dust upon stone, and we, who sit beside his shadow, wonder with him still. What did he see? What did he know? And more softly still, what did he feel? Rise now, gently, through the sunlit steps of the ziggurat. It looms over the plain, each level closer to the realm of the gods. Its bricks still breathe with heat by day, and sigh with coolness at night. At its summit, the priesthood walks in rhythm. Incantations drift skyward, carried by incense and wind, and within its chambers, where secrets gather like shadows, the battery may have waited, not proudly displayed, but hidden, tucked away in silence, its presence known only to a few. Perhaps it was not a tool, but a relic, a vessel of inherited power, a sacred object from a time even they barely remembered, a remnant from before the flood, before the kings, before the gods had temples. Inside the ziggurat shrine, as they're charged, and a single lamp flickers. Its light dances upon copper and clay. Did it hum in this sacred space? Did its quiet spark awaken something in the minds of those who stood beneath stars and believed they were being watched? The ziggurat is not a place for logic, but for liminality, for standing between the earthly and the divine, between what is known and what only the soul can sense. So perhaps the battery belonged here, not for function, but for feeling, for the ritual of mystery. Each level of the ziggurat speaks to a different realm. The base for the earth, the middle for the sky, the top for the heavens. And somewhere between these worlds, a hum once rose, a gentle pulse, a forgotten vibration. Now all that remains is stone and silence. But if you listen closely, if you press your palms to the ancient walls, you may feel the warmth that lingers, the echo of energy, the echo of all. And in that hush you will understand, not with the mind, but with the dream. Flowing slowly beneath the whispering reeds, the Tigris moves like a memory through time. Its waters once cradled cities, fed fields of barley, and mirrored the moonlight for a people who watched the stars. Tonight it mirrors us, as we drift silently along its banks, listening, not for answers, but for echoes. Somewhere near these winding shores, the battery was found, not in isolation, but among pottery and tablets, bones and bronze. Objects once touched, held, cherished, forgotten. The river has always remembered more than it reveals. It carries the weight of ages, not in its flow, but in its silence. Ancient barges once slid across its surface, their sails full of warm winds. Priests, scribes, traders, all passed this way, their voices now dissolved in mist, and in their boats, perhaps a jarredest one, tucked beneath cloth and grain, bound for a temple or a city's edge. A vessel not of water, but of wonder. Did someone stumble upon its power accidentally? Did a child drop copper into sour wine and feel the tingle of mystery awaken? Or was it passed down from older hands to younger, like a story whispered before sleep? We do not know. But the river does. Its song is soft, a rhythm of centuries, a melody of forgetting. And as we float beside it, our thoughts settle, our breath aligns with the current, and we begin to feel that the Baghdad Battery was never just a device, it was a ripple, a shimmer in the water of time, a moment when someone long ago reached beyond what was needed toward what was possible. The river remembers that reaching, and tonight, so do we. Beneath the stars of Mesopotamia, long before the age of laboratories and instruments, there existed another kind of knowing, a knowledge woven not from calculation, but from feeling, from reverent observation, from patience, alchemy, not as myth or madness, but as the intuition of the cosmos. The Mesopotamians, with their hands stained by clay and oils, understood that nature whispered secrets. If one only listened long enough, they did not name electrons, they did not chart circuits, but they knew how copper and vinegar conversed. They knew how metal behaved in water, and how reactions, unseen, still moved the world. Perhaps, one day, a vessel cracked, and from its break, a spark, not fire but something more delicate. Perhaps a curious hard-dipped metal into fruit wine and felt the strange tremor of invisible forces at play. There are those who say such a discovery must come from theory, from reason, from systematic trial. But before theory, there is wonder. Before the modern mind, there was the ancient soul, attuned to rhythms not written in books, but in stars, and sand, and silence. This is where the Baghdad Battery may have lived, not in the realm of science but in the dream of alchemy. A dream where material and spirit were not enemies, but partners. A dream where the world responded to the careful hand and the open heart. And if the vessel hummed, if it pulsed, if it warmed slightly to the touch, that was not merely a reaction. It was a sign, an omen, a breath from the divine. Let us not dismiss their intuition for what they lacked in theory. They held in reverence, and perhaps that reverence carried them farther than we know. In the dim corners of forgotten storerooms, beneath layers of dust and collapsed ceilings, lie tablets. Thousands of them, each one pressed with cuneiform lines, wedges carved into soft clay, hardened by fire or sun. They speak of harvests and taxes, stars and floods, marriages and myths, but scattered among them are stranger things. Tables of numbers without names, curved symbols that match no known tongue, diagrams not of stars, but of circles within circles, lines intersecting coppery shapes. Could they be records of function? Could they be the unspoken language of an ancient energy? Or are we only seeing patterns because we long to? The Baghdad Battery is silent. It cannot confirm. And yet, what if someone once wrote its secret? Perhaps a scribe, moved by what he witnessed, etched more than ritual. Perhaps a set of tablets now broken, scattered in fragments across museums and storerooms, still carries its blueprint. Not the kind we understand. Not blue ink on white paper, but a dream of design, told in the shapes of gods and numbers, encoded for those who knew how to read with the soul. In Mesopotamia, knowledge was often hidden, held not by the many, but by the few. Priests and scribes, chosen and trained, whispered wisdom across generations. Secrets were sacred, their power preserved through silence. Perhaps, even now, the answer rests in clay, waiting for the right dreamer to remember how to see, to look not for voltage, but for metaphor, to listen not for proof, but for presence. Each tablet, a breath from the past. Each symbol, a flicker of something nearly lost. And in that flicker, might the battery live again, not as a machine, but as meaning. Let us return now to the beginning, not of the battery, but of the vessel itself. The clay, still damp with the breath of the river, resting in the hands of a potter. She sits by the fire pit, her fingers coated in earth, her arms steady from years of shaping vessels that hold both water and meaning. This potter, unnamed, unremembered, is the true beginning. The jar begins as formless mud. It is not born of ambition, but of craft. The wheel turns slowly beneath her, and she guides the clay with the same rhythm as the Tigris. Upward it rises, wobbling, smoothing, taking shape. Perhaps she hums as she works, a song passed from mother to daughter, a melody older than kings. She does not know that, one day, centuries later, strangers will debate the vessel's purpose in bright faraway rooms. To her, it is simple, a jar, meant to contain, and perhaps one day was chosen by someone else, a priest, a scholar, an alchemist, who looked at the clay and saw not just a container, but a conduit. They placed copper within it, not wine, iron, not grain. And in that moment, the jar became something else. But its soul, its origin, remained in the potter's hands. Let us honor her, for even the mysteries of electricity, the secrets of forgotten currents, begin with earth and water and touch, crafted slowly, with no need for fame. Only purpose, only presence. And now, as we imagine her sitting by her fire, glancing up at the stars while her vessel cools in the dust, we wonder, did she sense that what she shaped would one day stir the world's dreaming? Beyond the ziggurats, past the bustling bazaars and market cries, at the edge of a quiet street, there may once have stood a workshop of peculiar silence, not grand like the tempos, nor crowded like the smithy, but small and shadowed. Inside, shelves of tools shaped from bronze and bone, jars of powders, oils, and ash, strips of copper curled like dried leaves, scrolls resting heavy with dust, and in the corner a row of clay vessels lined with metal. Perhaps this was the home of one who did not call himself inventor, perhaps a seeker, a quiet man, gray at the temples, marked by ink and solitude. He does not shout his craft. He listens to the way vinegar sizzles when it meets metal, to the smell of oxidation that rises warm and sour, to the quiet snap, the barely audible pop when current stirs. He may have smiled when it worked, not with triumph, but with recognition, as if rediscovering what the world had once known, then forgotten. Perhaps he kept no records. Perhaps he feared what others might say, or perhaps he whispered his secrets only to apprentices, to sons or daughters who no longer walked the earth. His workshop fell silent. The roof collapsed. Time swallowed his tools. But somewhere in the dust, the battery remained. And now, as we drift through this imagined room, lit only by oil lamp glow, we feel his presence, not his identity, but his essence, a soul not content with what was known, a spirit who leaned toward the unknown with reverence. Perhaps this forgotten workshop was not forgotten at all. Perhaps we stand in it now, each time we wonder, each time we listen, to the hum behind history. Before speech was written, before the tongue found form in clay and line, there was another language, a more subtle tongue, the language of light, of flame, of warmth, and later, of spark. The ancients knew this language not through science, but through sensation. The jolt of touching metal too soon cooled, the way amber, rubbed in cloth, pulled at dust, the tingle in the palm after storm, split the sky above. They may not have called it electricity, but they knew its name in their own way, a whisper in the fingertips, a murmur from the gods. When the Baghdad Battery gave off its charge, a faint, invisible thread of power, what name did they give it? Did they speak of spirits, of divine breath, of the life within objects? Perhaps their word was not a noun but a feeling, not something to define but to witness. We forget that words are not the only way to know. And power, true power, does not always roar. It can whisper, it can hum. So imagine, dreamer, a priest holding the jar, not understanding current or electron, but sensing something alive within it, something that answered his touch with a soft resistance, a flicker, a sign. And he, not because he knows, but because he feels. That is the language of sparks, and it is older than we remember. It speaks not only in volts, but in reverence. And if we grow quiet enough, if we still the mind and open the soul, we too can hear it. Even now, beneath the worn streets of Babylon, in the buried foundations of forgotten cities, there may lie a network, not of wires, but of echoes, not conduits of copper. The ancients built with meaning. Their stones aligned with stars. Their temples matched the rhythm of the equinox. Their roads curved like constellations. Their bricks were prayers. So what if, in some distant era now lost, they built not only for shelter, but for resonance? We walk today upon silent earth, but energy may still pulse beneath it. Energy laid long ago by hands that understood harmony in ways we no longer see. Imagine standing in a great hall of sandstone and shade, the floor warm underfoot, not from sun but from something beneath. No fire, no flame, just a soft presence. A hum was of the earth speaking, or something they placed there, to remind themselves of connection. There are stones, still today, that register strange energies. Measuring tools flicker, animals hesitate. We do not know why. We do not understand. But perhaps the builders of the Baghdad Battery did. Perhaps they knew that power was not something to dominate, but to harmonize with. That energy, like music, could be tuned. And the battery, it may have been a tuning fork, a key, a modest device to align the body with the structure with the stars, and all of it with the great, slow breath of the world. Do not ask how. Ask instead, what if? What if the ancients moved within living architecture? What if the earth hummed and they listened? And what if, in this still night, we are beginning to listen again? In the warm hush of ancient cellars, where amphorae lined the walls like silent sentinels, liquids aged and transformed, wines turned to vinegar, sweetness gave way to sharpness, time did its quiet work, and there, amidst the scent of fermentation, the sour tang of change, lay something sacred. Alchemy, not the transmutation of lead into gold, but of the ordinary into the meaningful. The ancients knew that in the right hands, even spoiled wine could become a key. The Baghdad Battery required no lightning, no forge, or now humble acid like vinegar, a liquid both common and alive. Perhaps it was a temple servant who poured it, or a curious alchemist who dared to test the copper tube, the iron rod, and the sour wine. Together, they sang, not loudly, but truly, a quiet crackle, a shimmer in the finger, a flicker in the soul. And in that moment, electricity, but the ancients would not have called it so. To them, it was spirit, it was life, the same spark that animates breath, that dances in storms, that flashes in the eyes of the lion. They did not extract meaning from nature, they joined it. The reaction within the battery was no accident. It was a ritual, the sourness of the vinegar, not a flaw, but a gift, a sign that even what has aged, what has turned, still holds power. We often forget that the sacred and the spoiled can share the same vessel, that transformation requires both decay and time. And so, in the dark corners of the temple or the workshop, the battery came to life not through invention, but through alchemy, a sacred mixture, a quiet miracle, and the memory of it, faint as a breath on copper, still lingers in the shadowed dreams of the world. Among the pantheon of Mesopotamia, there was one whose voice was the wind, whose breath stirred the clouds, whose whisper could raise kingdoms or cast them down. Enlil, the god of air, of storm, of unseen motion, he ruled not through fire or stone, but through presence, unseen, unfelt, until it moved. When the wind shifted across the plains, when a sudden gust swept through the reeds, the people believed it was Enlil walking past. His presence could not be seen, but it could be felt. Just like the current in the battery, invisible, mysterious, real, perhaps the spark within the jar was seen not as a discovery of man, but the breath of a god captured in clay. Enlil's breath, contained, tamed, honored, and perhaps the priests who tended the jar did not see it as science, but as covenant, a sacred object through which the divine whispered, a tangible hum, a tingle on the skin that reminded them, the gods are near. In a world where everything was sacred, where rivers had names, where trees listened, where stars kept watch, a small vessel with a living spark was nothing less than miraculous. It is easy for us, now, to view the ancients through the lens of what they did not know. But what if they knew something different? What if they understood that not all power comes in bolts and engines? Some comes in silence, in sensation, in trust. And in that quiet temple, when the battery stirred, and a priest touched its copper mouth and felt a soft bite of energy, he may have smiled, for it was Enlil, the breath of air, the whisper of motion, the god who could not be held, now speaking from within a jar we call a battery, but they may have called divine. Long before the sky was mapped in weather charts, before the storm was studied through numbers and graphs, lightning was a messenger. To the ancients, a bolt from the heavens was not random, it was purposeful. The sky cracked open, and through that moment, a god's intent was revealed. In Mesopotamia, where every flicker of light carried meaning, lightning was a language of warning and of wonder. Engli, Marduk, Ishtar, each with tempers of cloud and fire, each with voices made of thunder. So when a spark leapt from metal, even small, even tamed, was it so strange to see divinity in it? Electricity, to them, was not a tool to be measured, but a sign to be interpreted. A small charge, felt on the skin, may have been read as a message, a reminder that the gods were watching. Perhaps a priest would carry the jar into a chamber veiled in smoke, and there, in solitude, test its hum before making a decision of war, of kingship, of harvest. We do not know how far their rituals went, but we do know this. They watched the sky with reverence, they studied its moods, and they believed that heaven and earth were connected by breath, by light, by spark. The Baghdad Battery, though small, might have mirrored this cosmic truth, that even in a humble jar clay made of vinegar one could glimpse the sky's own fire, captured, not stolen, but invited, not harnessed, but honored. And that is the difference. The ancients did not seek to dominate the spark. They sought to commune with it, to ask it questions, to listen. And so must we, even now, as we peer through centuries, and try to understand what they knew. Perhaps the battery does not ask to be solved, but simply remember it as a flicker of the divine held in human hands. In a world ruled by what is seen and touched, there has always existed another realm, the realm of the invisible. A realm where forces dance that we cannot hold, yet feel, where meaning whispers just beyond the reach of our senses. The Mesopotamians lived in both worlds. They walked the dusty streets of yore with sandals and scrolls, but their eyes often turned upward. Two omens in the stars, two movements in the wind, two signs carved not into stone, but into silence. And so, when something happened without explanation, they did not dismiss it. They listened. A tingle in the hand, a soft hum from copper, a spark between iron and fluid. This was not ignored, it was gathered, meditated upon. They did not require proof to believe. Belief itself was a way of seeing. Perhaps that is what the Baghdad Battery represents. Not a leap in technology, but a leap in attention, to feel the unseen, and to name it sacred. We live now in a world of wires, of constant charge and light, yet rarely do we pause to wonder. Rarely do we close our eyes and feel the current. But they did. The ancients, the dreamers, they felt that electricity was not invention, but invitation, to glimpse something larger moving beneath the surface of things, a force that was neither magic nor machine, but a third thing, between now and always. So let us hold that jar in our thoughts. Let us cradle it gently in the mind's palm, a vessel of mystery, of silence, of invisible possibility. And let us remember, not all that is real can be seen. Not all that is powerful must be loud. Some truths arrive like a single spark in darkness, lighting the dream from within. In the deep corridors of ancient temples, far from the noise of city gates and market songs, there lived quiet guardians, tenders of flame, watchers of breath, keepers of small fires. Not warriors, not kings, but caretakers of the in-between. Perhaps one such keeper watched over the battery, not understanding its purpose completely, but feeling its presence like one feels the heat of a coal before the flame appears. Each day, he would enter the sanctum barefoot, his robes brushed by incense and dust. He would lift the jar from its place on the altar, replace the rod, pour fresh vinegar, and listen, not for sound, but for stillness. He did not ask the vessel to perform, he asked it to exist, and in that existence, he found reverence. The small jolt that came with touch was not a tool. It was a reminder that life is charged, that even in silence, there is motion. He may have whispered prayers to it, or simply breathed in its presence, as one might before a sacred flame. The world outside was full of demands: trade, war, flood, law. But here, in this forgotten chamber, was only one thing: a quiet connection between man and mystery. And so he stayed. Through seasons and shadows, through births of kings and deaths of dynasties, he remained the keeper, not of fire that consumes, but of fire that whispers. The battery, if that is what it was, remained with him. Not because it was powerful, but because it was present. And in its quiet hum the keeper heard the echo of all things, the breath of gods, the murmur of stars, the stillness beneath time. Not all keepers are remembered. Most are not. But if you feel a strange warmth when you imagine the jar, if you sense a presence where none should be, perhaps he is still tending, still keeping, still waiting, so that when the world is ready to hear again, the small fire will still be burning. Some messages are not meant for their own time. They are placed into the world like bottles cast into a vast ocean, not to be read by the sender, but by someone, someday, far beyond the horizon. Perhaps the Baghdad Battery was just such a message, a signal, sent not by accident, but by faith. Faith that someone, someday, would understand not only how it worked, but why it mattered. The jar was not inscribed with words. Its meaning was not declared in symbols. It offered no clear intent, only mystery. And that is why it still speaks. Because mystery never ages. When the archaeologists unearthed the vessel in 1936, they did not find just an object. They found a question that had waited patiently beneath the dust. It did not shout, it did not demand. It simply existed, quietly alive. And now, nearly a century later, we still turn to it. We still wonder. Not just, did they make electricity, but what else did they know? What other truths lie buried in the unassuming forms of jars and stones? What signals have we missed because we expected the past to look like the present? The Baghdad Battery asks us to expand our vision, to see sacredness in simplicity, to feel meaning in uncertainty, and perhaps to recognize that the greatest messages are the ones that arrive slowly, like a charge building in copper, like vinegar seeping into iron, like time itself. And so tonight, as we sit beside this artifact, let us not dissect it. Let us receive it as a gift across millennia, a gesture from the ancients, a reminder that the unknown is not to be feared, but to be listened to like a spark that waits until we are ready to feel it. There is a sound that cannot be heard, but only remembered, a sound not born of voice or a string, but of presence. The ancients knew this hum, not through ears, but through skin, through breath, through silence. It is the sound of copper warming, of iron awakening, of liquid meeting metal in a sacred rhythm, the sound of potential cradled in clay. The Baghdad Battery may have carried this hum, not loud, but deeply, and though centuries have passed, though its surfaces have dulled, and its parts corroded, the hum remains, buried beneath layers of time, wrapped in quiet. It still speaks to those who dared to wonder, to those who pause long enough to feel, to those who believe that the past does not end, it echoes. Imagine holding it in your hands, a weight neither heavy nor light, cool to the touch, unassuming, and yet, somewhere within, a tension, a presence, the same feeling one might get when standing on ancient ground, or gazing at a star that no longer exists. A connection not of distance, but of depth. The hum is still there, not in the object, but in the space it created, the space between what is known and what is felt, between what is made and what is remembered. Perhaps that is its true gift, not electricity, but awareness, an invitation to dwell in wonder, to recognize the sacred in the ordinary, to believe, once more, that even a simple vessel can contain the cosmos. And as the dust of centuries settles around it, the hum remains, waiting not to be solved but to be sensed. Not all sacred places have pillars, not all temples rise from stone. Some are built from questions, from silence, from the space between knowing and not knowing. Perhaps the true temple of the Baghdad Battery was never a building, but the reverence it inspired. It did not require incense or sacrifice. It needed only attention. To hold it, to wonder at it, was already an act of devotion. Even now, thousands of years removed, we sit before it in the theater of thought. We circle it with language, with imagination, with awe. That, too, is worship, not of the object but of the mystery. In this way, the battery creates its own temple, wherever it is remembered. It does not demand belief. It only invites stillness, and in that stillness we find something rare, a feeling that the world is larger than its facts, that history is not only a record, but a rhythm, that the ancients may have known what we have forgotten. That wonder is holy. So imagine, for a moment, the battery resting on a cloth of woven reed, not behind glass, but beneath stars. A circle of those who do not yet know, but choose to listen. No sermon, no script, only the object and the questions it awakens. This is a temple, and we are its congregation, bound not by doctrine but by dreaming, bound by the sacred possibility that the past is not dead, only waiting in clay and copper and silence, waiting for the temple to be rebuilt, not with walls, but with wonder. There are pulses that live beyond the heart, not the beat of blood, but the quiet thrum of energy, moving, searching, whispering through matter. Perhaps the Baghdad Battery once carried such a pulse, small, invisible, alive, a current not measured in numbers, but in meaning. To those who held it, the sensation may have felt like life itself, a shiver just beneath the skin, a recognition, a pause in time. We live in a world now flooded with power, wires in our walls, devices in our hands, currents constant and unseen, and yet we have lost our sensitivity to the subtle, to the quiet pulse, to the breath of copper, to the electricity that does not announce itself, but waits to be felt. The ancients may have had fewer tools, but sharper senses. They listened to stone, they read the wind, they felt the pulse of objects and named it sacred. The battery was not an invention, but an encounter. Perhaps the pulse it offered was not for lighting lamps, but for lighting minds. A moment of contact between human and mystery, between clay and cosmos. It is a gentle thing, this forgotten pulse. It does not strike or surge. It sings softly like a harp beneath the earth. And if we quiet ourselves now, if we sit with the memory of the jar, the weight of copper, the tanks of vinegar on air, we may feel it still, not with fingers, but with presence, not in the nerves, but in the spirit. For some pulses never die. They are not measured in voltage, but in wonder, and even buried beneath centuries, they wait for a dreamer to note it. Metals remember, not in words, not in images, but in sensation. Copper, that soft, red gold metal drawn from Earth's deep veins, holds memory like breath, holds warmth. To the ancients, copper was not merely useful, it was sacred. A metal of Venus, a beauty, a balance. They shaped it with fire, polished it by hand, embedded it into amulets, laid it into jars. And when they placed it within the vessel, curved, folded, hollowed, it became something more. It became receptive to the pulse, to the hum. Even now, when we look upon the Baghdad Battery, we see not corrosion, but memory. Tarnishes testament, patina, a story. Every green stain a whisper of the centuries. The copper remembers when it was placed into clay, when iron entered the mix, when vinegar or wine was poured in, and the unseen spark began to flow. A spark, not bright but deep, and we've thousands of years removed, can still sense it. That is the gift of copper. It holds the trace of what has passed through it, a residue of mystery. To hold that copper today, to lift it gently, is to press one's palm to the skin of history. It warms, it listens. And if you lean close enough, if your mind softens, you may feel it, remember. Not names or dates, but something older. The feeling of being used for more than purpose. For wonder, let the copper speak now, in silence, in stillness. Let it remind you that the past is not cold. It glows softly, endlessly, like the memory of a spark that once traveled through a jar made by hands that believed. Iron is the weight of the world, drawn from Earth's core, forged in stars. It grounds us. It is the skeleton of bridges, the root of blood, the echo in the hills when struck. And in the Baghdad Battery, it stood still, a single rod, straight and rusting. But it, too, carried meaning. To the ancients, iron was more than metal. It was power, a gift fallen from the sky. Meteoric iron, the metal from heaven, was the first they knew. Before they mined it, they found it fallen in the desert, embedded in sand, black and gleaming under the sun. They believed it came from the gods, and perhaps it did. So when a rod of iron was placed within clay and copper, it was not merely function, it was invocation, the meeting of sky and earth, of heaven's blade and soil's vessel. The iron rod suspended in liquid, waiting for touch, for the moment when energy would rise. And even now, though oxidized, though softened by time, the rod remains, a pillar, the still axis around which wonder turns. We often overlook the iron, drawn to the mystery of current, the elegance of copper. But without iron, there is no path, no contrast, no charge. The ancients knew this balance. They understood that power must be envied with reverence and resisted with strength. The rod did not shine, it did not speak. It simply stood, silent, steady, essential. And perhaps that is the lesson, that in every system of mystery, there must be something that holds, a center, an anchor, the iron within. And as we drift deeper into this story, let us place our own iron rod in the still waters of dreaming. Let us root ourselves in the quiet strength of the unknown. Let the current rise, not to shock but to awaken. At the heart of every current, there is tension, not conflict, but contrast, positive and negative, stillness and stir, copper and iron, liquid and breath. The Baghdad Battery held this tension gently, like a bowl cradling water. Between its metal parts flowed vinegar, a simple acid, sharp and sacred. It was this sourness that allowed the energy to rise, an unexpected truth, that life's soft power is often born through transformation, through fermentation, through time. The vinegar was not chosen by accident. It was known, it was purposeful. In the temples, it cleansed. In medicine, it preserved. In ritual, it symbolized purification. But in the battery, it became something more. It became a conductor. Between iron and copper, it whispered. It awakened. In that tiny space, a spark. The ancients may not have spoken of ions or flow, but they understood reaction. They understood balance. They watched how elements interacted and honored the invisible between them. For the sacred always lives in the between acid and air, between clay and fire, between what is and what could be. This narrow space inside the vessel, dark, wet, unlit, was the birthplace of something eternal. A chamber where silence met motion, where mystery found momentum. Even now, when we imagine it, we feel the same tension. We, too, are made of contrasts, of opposites, and we, too, hold a space within where spark may dwell. So let us honor the simple acid, the sour breath of earth that stirred ancient metals into meaning. Let us remember that change, though subtle, is sacred, and that energy, the quiet kind, often rises from what we would discard, from what's ours, from what waits. The fire had burned low. Coals glowed beneath the bricks, breathing their last warmth into the dark. In the corner of the chamber, the jar sat ready, its body clad, its heart here and its blood vinegar. A vessel complete, alive in stillness, waiting. A hand reached for the cork, not rushed, not fearful, deliberate, solemn. Perhaps it was a priest, perhaps a scholar, perhaps a woman whose name has long since disappeared from stone. She pressed the cork into the jar, sealing it. A simple act, yet profound. To seal something is to say it is ready, complete, whole. To seal is to enclose more than contents. It is to preserve intention. To say, this was made with care, let it endure. And so, in that quiet night, by firelight and starlight, the battery was sealed, not to be buried, but to be kept. Not for display, but for use, or for waiting. Did she know that no one would open it for thousands of years? Did she sense that her hands were crafting a question that would echo across time? Perhaps, as she sealed it, she offered a prayer, not for power, not for fame, but for remembrance. Let this be held, let this be known, let this not be lost. And though the jar would pass through ruin, through hands and wars and sands, it was not lost. It was sealed with intention, and intention travels through silence, through centuries. Tonight we remember her hands. We honor the moment of sealing, that tender press of cork to clay, like a kiss upon the forehead of a sleeping world. Let us carry that gesture with us into our own unsealed hours. Let us walk gently with the mysteries we keep, and when we close them, let it be with care, for the sealed jar may one day speak again. The earth is a keeper of stories, not just those etched in stone, but those gently placed within her arms, wrapped in silence, cradled in time. The Baghdad Battery, once sealed, did not vanish. It was buried, not with fanfare, not with grief, but with stillness. Perhaps it was lowered into a storage pit, beside forgotten tools and half-broken statues, or tucked into a temple alcove. Its purpose no longer spoken aloud. Years passed, then centuries. The cities above it rose and fell. The streets shifted, the walls collapsed, the names were swallowed. But the earth remembered. Rain softened the layers. Wind brought sand. Time covered what memory released. And still, beneath it all, the battery remained intact, unseen, unspoiled. We often think of history as what is written, what is displayed, what is proclaimed, but much of it, the most sacred parts, lingers beneath our feet, quietly held by the soil. The battery did not need to be worshipped. It needed only to wait. Until one day, in the early 20th century, a team of archaeologists turned over the stones and saw it, a simple jar, unimpressive to the hurried eye. But within it a whisper awakened, as if the vessel had merely been sleeping, and was ready to open its eyes, not to explain itself, but to be seen, to say without voice, I was here, I was made, and I endured. That is the lesson of the buried. They are not gone. They are only waiting for someone to listen. So tonight, we listen. to all that lies beneath, to the truths we have not yet uncovered, to the gentle insistence that the past is still alive, not in books, not in name, but in jars beneath the earth, in silence that hums, in things buried but never forgotten. It rests now behind glass, in a museum touched by sunlight and time. Its label is brief, its description cautious, its purpose still questioned. Visitors pass it by, some barely noticing, others pause, tilting their heads, eyes narrowing with the same quiet curiosity that once stirred in ancient temples. But there is one, a curator, whose hands have lifted the jar with reverent care, who has traced the rust of the iron, the curve of the copper, the scent of the ancient clay. She does not claim to know its story, she does not demand explanation, but she feels its pull, its presence. After the museum closes, when the lights dim and the halls quiet, she sometimes lingers near its case, not to study, not to analyze, but to listen, to feel. And in that hush, she senses the same one that stirred in the hands of its maker, a flicker of recognition, the echo of intention. The jar has traveled far, from kill to altar, from earth to excavation, from forgotten shelf to polished pedestal. But its journey is not over, not while hearts still wonder. The curator knows this. She tends not just the artifact, but its atmosphere. She places it gently, cleans it softly, speaks of it with respect. And sometimes, though she would never say it aloud, she dreams of it, of what it meant, of what it means. She dreams of the hum it may have once carried, of the night it was sealed, of the breath between metals that sparked the unknown. And in her dreaming, the battery lives again, not as a riddle, but as a presence, as a quiet invitation to remember. For in every age, there are those who keep the flame, not with fire, but with feeling. The curator is one of them, and so are we. We have walked through dust and firelight, past temples and worked along riverbanks and through dreams, all to reach this point. And what have we found? A jar, simple, silent, yet full, not with liquid, but with questions, not with voltage, but with vision. The Baghdad Battery remains unsolved. Was it a tool, a toy, a holy relic? The truth may never be certain, and perhaps that is the point, for not every relic is meant to be explained. Some are meant to remain, like stars we cannot touch, but which guide us just the same. The mystery endures because it must, because we need it too. In a world obsessed with answers, it is the questions that keep us human. The jar invites us to sit quietly in the presence of what we do not know, and to be at peace there, to listen for the hum that may still linger in the air like a breath between centuries, to imagine a world where knowledge and spirit were never separate, where copper and iron were not just materials, but mediators between the visible and the invisible. We do not come to the Baghdad Battery to dissect it, we come to feel its gravity, to place ourselves, for a moment, in the soft current of the ancient mind, to wonder what it was like to create something sacred and not write down why. And so, as we reach the end of this journey, we do not close the story. We leave it open, like a vessel, waiting to be filled again, with thought, with feeling, with breath. Let the battery remain as it always has, still, whole, unanswered. Not a relic of failure or fantasy, but a monument to the beautiful unknown, a quiet reminder that not all things must be solved. Some, like dreams, are meant only to be remembered. And now, dear dreamer, as the echoes of copper and clay fade gently from your thoughts, and the hush of Mesopotamian wind settles once more into stillness, let us give thanks not for answers, but for questions that cradle us through the night, for the mystery that does not shout, but waits, patiently, like a sealed jar in the dark. May the Baghdad Battery remain in your memory, not as a puzzle to be solved, but as a portal, a doorway to stillness, to reverence, to that forgotten feeling that even the smallest object may carry the weight of the divine. We walk now away from the rivers, from the temples, from the buried vaults of time. The stars above you remain unchanged, just as they were when the jar was shaped and the spark first stirred. Let their light guide gently into sleep. And before we part, if these ancient whispers have warmed your soul, if the silence of forgotten knowledge speaks to your heart, let your presence linger with us through a gentle like, and join our circle of wanderers and watchers by subscribing. Let us drift together again night after night, through forgotten ruins and sacred shadows, and tell us, if you feel moved to share, from what quiet corner of the world you've joined this evening's journey. Let our dreaming be global. Let our hearts gather beneath shared stars. Sleep now, in the hush of old mysteries, wrapped in the warmth of forgotten firelight, cradled by clay vessels and the hum beneath the dust, until the next journey beckons. Good night, and may your dreams be filled with soft sparks from long ago.